Welcome back, dears. As we have discussed in the live class, Quality is a story about a German shoemaker whose name is Mr. Gisler. He is acquainted with the author from his days of youth when the shoemaker used to make boots for the author's father. The shoemaker Gisler used to live with his elder brother in a shop. His shop was a small one in the by street of fashionable part of London. The shop was a bit different than the rest of the shop because there was no sign on the shop except for the name on it, and there were a few pair of boots in the window. We can see the shoemaker made only what was ordered by the customer, and the shoemaker was so skilled that the boots he made always fit the customer perfectly. The author comments that the boots he made and how he made them seemed mysterious and wonderful. The author had even asked the shoemaker if it was hard to make such boots. And the shoemaker replied and smiled and said that it was an art. Making shoes is an art. The author said that going to the store often was not possible because his shoes lasted longer than expected. That was the quality of the shoes. The atmosphere inside the shop was different as well. It was like going inside a church. The customer had to wait by sitting on a single wooden chair. And we can hear a guttural sound would come from upstairs and tip-tap of the shoemaker's slippers as he would descend the stairs. And Mr. Gisler had an unprofessional look. He would stand a little bent towards the customer in his leather apron and the sleeves of his shirt turned back. He would blink as though he had just been awakened by some dream of boots. The author would then put forward his order and the shoemaker would bring a piece of leather. He used to talk in a German accent because he is basically from Germany. And the shoemaker would admire the piece and the author would also do the same. Then the shoemaker would ask the author when he would want his order and he would say as conveniently as he could. The shoemaker would keep the date as the next fortnight, but if it were his elder brother who would be attending the author, he would say that he will ask his brother and then let him know. And up to this only I have told you in the live class. I have explained you in the live class, so we will deal with the remaining part. Then I would murmur, "Thank God. Good morning, Mr. Gisler. Good morning," he would reply, still looking at the leather in his hand. And as I moved to the door, I would hear the tip-tap of his slippers going up the stairs to his dream of boots. Then the author would thank and bid the shoemaker goodbye. The shoemaker would do the same, but still his eyes will be observing the piece of leather. As the author would move towards the door, he would hear the tip-tap of his slippers going up the stairs, resuming his dream of boots. I cannot forget that day on which I had occasion to say to him, "Mr. Gisler, that last pair of boots creaked, you know." He looked at me for a time without replying, as if expecting me to withdraw or qualify the statement, then said, "It shouldn't have creaked." "It did, I'm afraid." "You got them you before they found themselves?" "I don't think so." At that, he lowered his eyes, as if hunting for memory of those boots, and I felt sorry I had mentioned this grave thing. "Send them back," he said. "I will look at them. Some boots," he continued slowly, "are bad from birth. If I can do nothing with them, I take them off your bill." Here the author says that one day an incident happened in his life. He told the shoemaker about the last pair of boots which creaked. And Mr. Jessler looked at the author without replying. He was expecting the author to take back his statement or to modify it. When the author didn't do so, Mr. Jessler said that it shouldn't have creaked. The shoemaker said that it was possible that they were wet before the author put on them. However, the author rejected this possibility. Then we can see that the shoemaker told the author that there are some boots which are bad since the starting of their manufacture, which is something that cannot be fixed. If there could be such a case for the boots too, he said, he would take them off of the author's bill. Once only I went absent-mindedly into a shop in a pair of boots bought in an emergency at some large firm. He took my order without showing me any letter, and I could feel his eyes penetrating the inferior covering of my foot. At last he said, "Those are not my boots." The tone was not of anger, nor of sorrow, not even of contempt. But there was in it something quiet that froze the blood. He put his hand down and pressed a finger on the place where the left boot was not quite comfortable. "It hurts you there," he said. "Those big worms have no self-respect." And then, as if something had given way within him, he spoke long and bitterly. It was the only time I ever heard him discuss the conditions and hardships of his trade. The author then tells about the day when he once went absent-mindedly into his shop to buy boots, as the ones that he had bought from a large firm in an emergency were not comfortable. Also, he wanted to ask the shoemaker if he had made those boots. Mr. Jessler took this order without showing him any letter, as he was busy studying the uncomfortable boots the author was wearing. When the author questioned him about the boots, the shoemaker said that those were not made by him. The tone of the shoemaker when he told the author that those boots were not made by him was not of anger or sadness. Neither was it disrespectful. However, he sounded so emotionless that the author was terrified. This indicates that Mr. Jessler's tone was cold and bitter, as though he were talking about someone or something he truly hated or was against. The shoemaker then put his hand down and pressed a finger at the left boot, specifically where the author was not finding the boot comfortable. Then the shoemaker told the author in a German accent that the spot he was touching was hurting the author. Then, bitterly and longingly, he began speaking about the conditions and the hardships of his trade. He complained that the big firms had no self-respect, and it was the first time the author had heard him discuss something so personal about his business.